Here's my disclosure. Speaking about switching therapy, we often assume that the reason for switching is different from a virological failure. In the case of virological failure, sometimes the situation is easier to solve because of a result of a resistance testing, or we'll do the change like empirically. But if the reason is different from a virological failure, or even if sometimes there are more than one, it could be a combination, it could become a difficult task. For the virological failure, same as for virological suppressed patients, change, we can use guidelines. We can see the algorithms for those situations in most of the guidelines, including the EX guidelines. On the next slide, I've listed the most common reasons for switching in virological suppressed patients, starting with toxicity, intolerance, DDIs, etc. I will not read them all, but you can see them on the slide. For the illustrating of a situation, I've used this graph coming from the River study, which was the retrospective non-randomized study on relatively low number of patients, more than 100, done by Spanish authors. As we can see here, almost one half of the patients switching, they were all virologically suppressed, was due to the toxicity of a previous antiretroviral regime, followed by inconvenience, 17% coming from DDIs, and the remaining 12.5% due to the other reasons. I would like to start with toxicity, and I will use tenofovir as a good example, but not the only one. There are so many. But as we all know, tenofovir, or better said TDF, the older version, has a large potential to cause nephrotoxicity, especially in a patient with pre-existing renal problems. It's caused by the fact that the large proportion of a tenofovir used by the patient as a daily dose remains as a free form in extracellular, the plasmatic compartment, and only a minority goes into the target cell. And those free part can cause the toxic lesion of a tubular part of a renal system. The effective and elegant solution for that could be the switch to a new version, which is called TAF, tenofovir alafenamide, which is used only in reduced. It's used in a reduced dose in comparison with the TDF daily dose, and majority of that dose goes directly to the target cell, and only a small part remains in a plasmatic compartment. On the next slide, we see one graph from study 104 and 111. These were patients who were previously non-treated, and they were put on a standard triple combination, including a TAF in one arm and TDF in a second arm. We see the graphs in here. The TAF is the blue curve, and the orange one is TDF. And on this slide, we see the eGFR and changes in comparison with the baseline within the period of 144 weeks, so large period of time. And we see the decrease in eGFR in both arms, but in a TAF, we see the smaller difference, especially coming smaller within the time. It's closer to the baseline. So it just demonstrates what I've been talking about a few minutes ago. What about intolerance? As an example of intolerance, I want to use representative first generation of non-nukes, which is efavirenz. Efavirenz was for many years used as a gold standard in many clinical trials as a comparator. And this meta-analysis made by François Raffi, we see the proportion of side effects between efavirenz and the new representant or new representant of non-nuke, which is rilpivirine. And in all three studies, they were quite done on a large number of enrollees, and two of them were double-blinded and randomized. And in all of these three studies, we see a large difference, prioritizing or they make superior the comparator, which was rilpivirine, because the efavirenz has a large potential to cause especially neuropsychiatric side effects. We can see this detailed figure. I will spend a few more seconds within the group of non-nukes. There is a new kid on the block called duravirin, which is now registered for less than 2 months in US for the treatment of HIV-positive patients. It's also non-nuke, and at this slide, coming from drive forward study, we see a promising and positive lipid profile and duravirin in comparison with the traditional PI, which is darunavir boosted with ritonavir. There is no doubt that DDIs plays a huge role in our clinical practice, and coming back for many times today to the Liverpool database, you can see this figure comparison of potential to cause DDIs in a group of traditional three integrase, raltegravir, dolutegravir, and elvitegravir used with cobicistat together as a booster dose. And I've used this slide to show that not always automatically the newest drug is the best one in all the aspects. Raltegravir we are using for more than 10 years now, but as we see from this slide, the drug-drug interactions profile, I'm not able to use it accurately, of raltegravir looks better from these three substances. I was also already touching the term of booster agents. In the past, we were mostly using ritonavir to boost the protease inhibitor. Now we mostly use cobicistat, not the version. There's nothing to do together, but we use it for the same purpose as a booster agents, not only with the PIs, but also with elvitegravir. Ritonavir, as an older version, contained the potential of drug-and-drug interaction, as well as some potential of hepatotoxicity and also intolerance by some patient. But even the cobicistat has a potential to cause many drug-and-drug interaction, as we have already seen at the previous slide. One of the potential solutions is to not avoid or limit or use less the agents who are boosted, so prefer the non-boosted agents. And speaking about integrase inhibitor, I have to mention the newly coming drug, bictegravir new integrase, which has not to be boosted as was, for example, the elvitegravir, and belonging to the same group of non-boosted integrase together with raltegravir and dolutegravir. DDI is a large group of potential problems and solutions. Victor was speaking about hepatitis C, HIV co-infected patients, so we have to be also very careful of potential DDIs when we start or before we start treat the patient with DAAs. And there is on a decision of a clinician if we will prefer to remain on the former HIV track regime and influence the choose the option treatment of a Hep C, or we will prefer or prioritize the Hep C treatment and we will change temporarily, or temporarily the HIV drug regime for the period of HCV treatment, or if the patient is convenient, everything works fine, the patient could remain on a new HIV regime even after finishing successfully the treatment for Hep C, which we know right now is limited to 11 or 8 weeks, very short period of time. Cardiovascular risk, another big issue in HIV clinical practice. Earlier this year, we have seen a presentation as a late breaker at CROI conference presented by Patrick Mellon from Ireland. This platelet sub-study of study 1717, patients who were treated with combination including abacavir 3-TC, and part of them was randomized to switch to TAF FTC. And we all know that abacavir has a risk of cause cardiovascular risk, especially myocardial infarction, and we're all interested in about etiological process of that potential. And Patrick Mellon, within this study, has shown us that this graph presenting the level of soluble glycoprotein 6, which was increasing significantly in comparison with the patient remaining on abacavir 3-TC in comparison with the switched arm who switched to TAF and FTC. This glycoprotein 6 has much to do with the functionality of platelets, and it could be a causative agent, or it could participate at the process of a cardiovascular risk in people using abacavir. Patient comfort is also important issue that we are facing every day in our clinical practice, and we all know about the availability of STR, but we also remember the old times with many pills and many doses within one day. STRs are very comfort, but it also has some disadvantages we have to take in account, but not only the number of doses and number of pills within one day, but also a volume, the size of a pills could play a role, especially in some patients. If we want to speak about simplification of a therapy, it's important to mention the dual therapy, new phenomenon. The standard therapy until now remains triple therapy using 3 drugs. Since the middle of 90s in the last century, we were using in all patients automatically 3 drugs. But in a recent time, we are hearing more and more frequently about the dual therapy. I don't want to go into details, but I just want to mention and share with you this slide presented by Ipsos recently in September this year. And we see there a proportion in 5 European countries, proportion of use of dual therapy, and we see also there a trend in a light green, the year 2013, and the dark one 2017, and we see some increase within the time. So we will see more details in the future about the dual therapy, but I'm sure it will play important role in our practice. Finally, I want to spend a few seconds with a specific population, for example, female population, in 2 aspects. The first one is, again, the drug-and-drug interactions in terms of contraceptives, especially in use together with the boosted agents, PIs, and agents boosted with cobicistat. The problem with the female population, female population data is that you all know that in majority of clinical trials, females, they have only a minority due to epidemiological reason, especially in developed countries. But which is more tricky are the women and pregnancy, because due to the ethical aspects we cannot involve them in standard clinical trials, and especially in combination with the newly coming drugs like, for example, dolutegravir, we have to wait some time until we will have enough data to use not only dolutegravir but even other new drugs safer in those special population like pregnant women are. So in summary, I want to say that a strategy to switching a virologically suppressed patient should be a combination and balance of data we have, most recent data we have. We should use also available guidelines, but also individualized approach to the patient and our clinical experience. Thank you.